I've got some Gatekeeper Keymaster hair today. Accidental theming. But yes, anyway, welcome to my spoiler review of Ghostbusters Afterlife. Yeah, it's a pure fan service movie, but I think in a really good way. Would I want every Ghostbusters movie going forward to be like this? Of course not. But I think this is a very good palate cleanser, and I'm excited as the franchise is clearly getting ready to aggressively move forward. I'm doing a whole separate video on that end credit sequence because there's some really, I think there's some very cool hints as to where they're going to go from here. And so I can't wait to discuss it with you. But today, we're going to talk about the film itself. And it follows, like where I want to start is that it clearly follows the Force Awakens model, but does it well. As in The Force Awakens was a redo of A New Hope. But this movie, see, as prime evidence of this being a good execution of the Force Awakens model, this doesn't make the pivotal error of not getting the band back together. I mean, one of them had to be digital because Harold Ramis tragically passed away, but they did a really good job. It was not only very realistic to the point where you're like, how'd you do that? That's amazing. Even though we know what visual effects can do today, I think it's still it took your breath away with how much it looked. You really did feel like Harold Ramis came back from the dead for this, or at least Egon did, and I think that was really moving. They got you in the feels, which is good. That's a good way to distract people. You know, when they're just annoyed, like during The Force Awakens. Although some people like The Force Awakens, and I think it's because you were punched in the feels. That's what I think it is. But you know, so it looked really good, but I think they were very respectful in how they brought him back. You know, I know they didn't weekend at Bernie's it or anything like that, or how horribly they handled bringing back Carrie Fisher after she passed away in Star Wars. Star Wars is like, why are we always the example of what was done wrong? We're like, why is that, Star Wars? Why is that? They're turning things around over there. And Ghostbusters is turning things around. So this is a copy of the first film. They even have Gozer. When Olivia Wilde crawled out of that hole, I swear to God, my first thought was, wow, she and Jason Sudeikis are both doing really well post-separation. I mean, wow, it seems to be like a career elixir for both of them. So I thought she was great. We're going to talk a little bit more about her in detail later in the spoiler review. We have the Gatekeeper and the Keymaster. I did not see them bringing them back. And it's like, these are things that would come out of left and right field, and you'd be like, oh, wow, that's fantastic. I love it. And again, it was very fan servicey, but they did it so well, and I think with such love. And I think that you know, when they did it for Star Wars, I don't know how this turned into a Force Awakens versus Ghostbusters Afterlife comparison video, but it did. I think it was like, oh, we're afraid to mess around with it. We don't know how to tell a good new. Maybe those same elements are here to a degree. But I think because Jason Reitman is Ivan Reitman's son, and Ivan Reitman was on set with him, they talked about doing that, having their producer and director's chairs right next to each other on set when I saw them speak at New York Comic Con. I think that it comes from a better, healthier place. And I think that Jason Reitman loves Ghostbusters as much as the fans do, so it's a fan doing fan service. I think it has that grounded quality. The movie's a little too grounded, to be honest with you, in points, but at that place it helps. Ivo Chandler, I was like, wow, that's amazing. Again, like, wow. It was J.K. Simmons, too. And then they killed him right away. And I was like, oh, of course I wouldn't expect you to kill J.K. Simmons right away. That was great. And then they reunited all the Ghostbusters in a believable and touching and respectful way. Now, I did have one problem with the film before I continue with how much I liked about it. But I thought they had a huge missed opportunity for a great message about teamwork. Because when you think about it, that message about teamwork has always been with the Ghostbusters films, right from the beginning. Like the Ghostbusters could only win the day in the first film if they crossed the streams, which is them literally banding together. Now here, what led to Egon's downfall? That he goes off on his own. I thought that opening credit sequence was a little weak because you weren't quite sure who it was. Egon. I didn't think they made it clear enough that it was Egon. I think there was like some idea that this movie had that you wouldn't know it was Egon until like they revealed it themselves, and you're like, what? But we all saw from the trailers that McKenna Grace is made up to look just like Egon, and they're like, oh, your grandfather. And we're like, okay, obviously her grandfather is Egon. And, you know, some of the descriptions, like, it was they did manage to keep a lot of secrets about this movie to their credit. And kudos to all of us, you know, everyone who saw it at New York Comic Con. I think that the leaks were minimal, which is really fantastic. But so I think the beginning of the movie is like, oh, who's this? And they should have just made it clear it was Egon, because like it didn't occur to me till halfway through. I was like, oh, is this supposed to be Egon? I'm not feeling it. So I didn't like that beginning. But anyway, I didn't like the whole first 20 minutes of the movie, as we'll talk about. But anyway, Egon's downfall came from him going off on his own. He wasn't supposed to go off on his own. And in every Ghostbusters mission that you see here, they make it clear that you can't ghost bust by yourself. It's a team sport. One of you has to hold him with the proton pack, with the stream. One of you has to put the trap out and open it. They had that a little bit in the first movie, but it was very clear to me here, especially when they were doing the thing down Main Street. One person had to drive. One person had to be in the gunner's seat with the proton pack, and one person needed to control the remote control device for the trap. And I thought that was really great. You can't do it alone. So I thought that was great. And that's what Phoebe needs to learn too in the movie, not to be a loner. So you can see that that's consistent throughout all the movies, but it's just like on the edge. They don't put it in a nice little package with a bow on it for you, like a good screenplay is supposed to. And I think that would be a particularly strong message today. So I felt bad that they didn't have it there. So when did I start enjoying the movie? I said I didn't like the first 20 minutes, although I did like the diner that they went to. I was like, oh, that's delightful. I told you in my review to make a diner food like part of your experience, because I thought that was really cozy. But when Phoebe started interacting with Egon's ghost, playing chess with the ghost in her room, that's when I was like, oh, this now I start to see where it's going. And when she switched on the proton pack, then the movie had me. Tears in my eyes. The sound design on that was incredible, as I said in my non-spoiler review. They even had New York Comic Con even managed to have surround sound there, even though it wasn't it was a converted space into a movie theater. But it just enveloped you. It was just so cool. Like, it was just so crisp and powerful. You were like, oh yeah. Like, they really let you savor it like a fine wine, swishing around in your mouth. Instead, this was in your ears, swirling around in your ears. And you were like, that's the stuff. I also, same feeling for when we had the siren for Ecto-1 tearing down Main Street. That I was just like, wow. But the beginning of the movie, before those elements, I felt like the movie, I didn't quite know that it was Egon, and it didn't feel like Egon, and we didn't really know what was going on there. I think that was supposed to be the ghost of the Keymaster or the gatekeeper, right? But I couldn't quite tell who was in there that was being captured. It was a little bit hard to tell what was going on. And then when we started to meet this family, there was like no setup or character development. And so it made it feel oddly disorienting, like you had not started the movie on time. Like, I felt very much so like they started the movie late. Like, I missed a few key scenes at the beginning. So that, again, as I said, I think disorienting is a good word for the first 20 minutes of the film. And while Phoebe is such a phenomenal character, her mother and her brother, not so much. And so when the movie's more about them at the beginning, and Phoebe's more kind of like, because she's a loner, when she's off to the side, I even thought the introduction of her was very sloppy. Oh, look, she's a crazy scientist. She's ripping out the wiring in the house. You were like, I think they could have introduced her better. Much better, actually. But Finn Wolfhard and Carrie Coon, not only were their characters not developed at all, no character development for them, but I didn't find their characters particularly likable or interesting. So that was a problem. Outside of Phoebe, Podcast, and Paul Rudd, all the P's in this movie were fabulous. But every other new character was kind of just there, like as a plot device or because the script needed them to be there. And so I had a problem with that. All right, so let's talk about my favorite sequences in the movie. All right, Walmart. That's my favorite sequence by far. Much better than I thought it would be, even though it was a giant product placement. I didn't even care that it was a giant product placement for Walmart. I was like, Walmart, you got a great product placement. The mini Stay Puft gags were wonderfully inventive, and I did not expect them to be that dark. I even looked away a few times when I saw the movie. I was laughing while I looked away, and there were so many groans of like, oh no, like, oh my God. It was like they kept killing themselves. It was crazy. But really funny. And then when he saw, the dog in one of the aisles, that's when I was like, oh my goodness, you're redoing the Rick Moranis scene. And that was so cool. That's what's so great. They managed to redo the Rick Moranis scene in a way that was as good as the Rick Moranis scene, but different enough that you felt it could kind of stand on its own. So I was like, oh, this is incredible. This is like an homage almost. Like, I guess that's what I like about it. It wasn't a copy, it was an homage. And also Paul Rudd smack in the middle there, and he's so lovable. You're like, Paul Rudd, you're the best. And speaking of Paul Rudd, the callback to the blown out windshield from when they tried out the trap and they released that thing again, and then Paul Rudd slid on the front of his car back through the blown out windshield to get in easily. That was a brilliant callback. A lot of the things here are obvious, but the movie did a good way in this regard of not tipping their hand. So that was really cool. Like once you saw it, you'd be like, oh, of course. But you didn't see it coming, so you could really enjoy the moment. So if Paul Rudd is the keymaster, he becomes the keymaster, very Rick Moranis, even after his transformation. That makes Carrie Coon the gatekeeper. And I did not see bringing these two things back. I didn't see that it would be the two of them. It was just very, very clever. And they had the same dress for Carrie Coon. But they used a little bit of a VFX upgrade where she pulled down her clothing and immediately turned into the dress, right? It was just a really quick, cool thing. The whole audience, when I saw it, was like, ooh, that was neat. But speaking of problematic things, right? Because I just said she tears her clothes off, but don't worry, she has a dress on underneath. But, the earlier flirtation between them and the fact that they were probably going to sleep together anyway, their first date was hilarious and charming, by the way. Really loved it. But that kind of fixes the problem of having two people be possessed and then sleeping together without their consent. So, it's still a little problematic, but at least I think that took the edge off of it. I wish Carrie Coon's character had more of her own agency rather than being character development for other characters, like for Paul Rudd and for Egon, the daughter he didn't pay attention to. I was like, why didn't I get to see any of that? Even just hints at it. You could have hinted at it. Like Carrie Coon kept complaining about how mean her dad was to her, and I was like, I didn't see it. I guess I'll have to take your word for it. But Phoebe being such a phenomenal character makes up for Carrie Coon's character being so underwritten. Phoebe, wow. McKenna Grace not only does a jaw-dropping job of channeling Harold Ramis. Like when I first saw her in the trailers, I thought it might be a little bit too much, but no, it's phenomenal because she's very Harold Ramis-y, very Egon-y, but she still manages to make the character her own thing. It's not just female Egon. It very much feels like Egon's granddaughter, and he has some strong genes. I loved it. And giving her bad jokes to tell was a stroke of genius. I loved that. And I thought that she told them really, really well. I thought they were great. They were kind of like dad jokes. I was like, these are science dad jokes. I was like, I'm having a good time. Tell me another one. Ghost busting. I loved all the ghost busting scenes in the movie. It does make you feel good, doing it and watching it. Logan Kim was so good as Phoebe's partner podcast. I saw a review that said he was the Ray Stantz of the group. They were trying to reassemble the formula, to recreate the different personalities. I was like, where's your Bill Murray if they're doing that? They didn't have a Bill Murray. And I didn't think Logan Kim was like Ray Stantz. I thought he was very much his own character. I thought he was really funny. And I liked seeing them do the practicing in the field with the proton pack. Again, they fired it up. And then when she first fired it, and it was such overkill for the target practice, that was so great. And I loved when they were all working together again on Main Street. I thought that the gunner seat, when that shot out of the car, it was so much more exciting than in the trailers. I think seeing this on the big screen was very, very cool. It was just great. And then a lot of suspense in that sequence. I loved it. And I liked everyone's reaction to seeing a Ecto-1 and Ghostbusters tearing through town. That was very fun. But then they got arrested. And Bokeem Woodbine, who I love, he's such a great actor. I wish he had more to do here. But I loved when she said, I want my phone call. And he said, who are you going to call? That's so great. Again, you don't quite see it coming, but when you see it, you're like, love it. Of course you had to say that. Then she calls Ray, and I thought her conversation with Ray was, it was very exposition-y. Again, you're like, show, don't tell, but they have a problem in that Harold Ramis passed away, so some of this they unfortunately can't show. So the tell, I think, was handled as good as it could have been. Then I thought also very clever having Muncher, this ghost that eats metal, letting him out to get out their locked up equipment when they needed it. I was like, oh yeah, and that's great. That's a great callback. Really good callback. Then the Gozer sequence. Again, Ivo Shandor with J.K. Simmons. Very funny. I was like, is that J.K. Simmons lying in that glass case? It is. And then when Paul Rudd and Carrie Coon got to turn it into the dogs and they were doing like the shaking and their hands up, I was like, how cool. I actually thought about how, and again, this is the homage feeling and the love. Because I was like, how cool must it have been to be on set and be those actors and be like, we're going to do the moment. We're going to do the moment from the original movie. And they really did it. It was so cool. And then I thought Olivia Wilde was a great Gozer. I thought that she looks a lot like the original actress. She, has the same physicality. I thought the hair and makeup team and the costume department did a fabulous job, like upgrading it, but yet still making it very much what everybody remembers. And the whole sequence was really cool. And they used her a lot. She could have just been like, hey, bye, hello, goodbye. And you'd be like, darn it, what a tease. But no, she was running around that cornfield. It was great. It was really, really fun. And then, of course, Harold Ramis showed up. And I was, again, I think you kind of thought that he might, but, to actually see him and that it looked so much like Harold Ramis, it was just really touching. I mean, like when he made up with his daughter, he was still just like manipulating the inanimate objects, still remained invisible. So to actually see him show up and be holding the proton, because at first I was like, how is Phoebe able to hold that proton pack steady, right? And then, of course, you see that it's because her grandfather is helping her. And Harold Ramis, particularly as he got older, he was like a big, substantial guy. So, like, you felt his strength, as not only her grandfather, but, like, as just an individual, as Egon. It was just so great. And then Ray Winston and, of course, Peter Venkman all returned. And they had some funny quips, but I didn't hear a lot of them because the audience I was with was just going nuts. Everyone was just like, oh my God, it was great. It was like being at a concert. And on that note, if you want, to talk about the end credits sequence, check out my separate video, which will be going up in the next day or so. So I'm excited to talk to you about that. So what do you think of the new Ghostbusters movie? What do you agree that it's a good palate cleanser? Do you think that it's better done than The Force Awakens, even though those two movies very much were doing the same thing? The Force Awakens, I guess, I don't know. I don't want, we all know how that story ended. I think Ghostbusters is going to go different this time. I'm very excited. Who were your favorite characters? Or what were your favorite sequences, right? And did you like all the callbacks? What were your favorite callbacks? Which ones surprised you? All right, share those thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.